I get money, I go washa. Give me one honey, I go washa. Bring that flavor with the platter. Rands and dollars and a kwacha. I am from the motherland.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us here at the Travel Podcast. My name is Elvis Molefi Molf, and I'm with Kagiso here. Of course, couple of weeks ago we posted some shorts with the Travel Podcast as the focus. But today we want to just do a little bit of introduction, just to highlight and break down what is the Travel Podcast, and also most importantly why we started this podcast. So I'm joined here with Kagiso. We are both hosts and we are both guests at the very same time because we're going to be doing this together. How's it, man?
I'm good, Elvis. Actually, I think this is quite important, for us to properly introduce, this beginning of a great journey that we are looking at ahead. There's a lot of things really relating to why we had started the podcast itself. A lot of reasons, a lot of background, and I think it's very important for us to make this specific episode that focuses on us just going out there, to explain to the people why have we started this journey that we're embarking. But I believe so much in it, and we still have a long way to go.
Okay, great stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's true. Let's talk about what actually inspired us, because I know there's a lot of things that inspired us. One of the guy who actually inspired us is a guy from Ghana. He goes by the name of Wode. So his story is very painful, but it's like, that kind of a story where a person is able to turn their pain into profit of sorts, because he lived in China. He lived in China for some time, and he used to do like small jobs in China. And looking at the ads on TV, the way they were portraying Africa, he was like, but that's not the Africa that I'm from, this version of Africa that you guys are portraying on TV. And a lot of people that went to Asia, even I know a couple of people that are teaching English in South Korea. They always say that when they get there, they see this vision of Africa being portrayed on TV, and it's not the real vision of Africa.
Yeah.
So he said, look, I'm going to make it my own responsibility to tour the whole African continent and then showcase it to the world. But not just showcase it, but showcase it in a way that it portrays the true version of Africa. And discovering Wode for me, it was like, wow, because you come from the tourism side of things, obviously. You are very passionate about tourism. I'm also passionate about traveling. And I think a lot of people want to travel. It doesn't have to be like from a tourism background. Maybe it's just a lack of information. They think it's expensive. They think all of those things. So I'm one of those people who love traveling. But you come from the tourism side of things. Let's talk about what motivated us or inspired us to start this travel podcast. Wode is one part, actually.
Yeah, exactly. But I think just taking it from the background story, of course, of the likes of Wode himself, it gets to tell that there are a lot of misconceptions around Africa. I mean, if it takes a young person who comes from the country of Ghana going to live in China from an early age, to also realize that, no, man, there are a lot of disconnect, within terms of how Africa is portrayed to the world, And I think not only to blame the world also, I feel like we as the Africans, we must be responsible ourselves, in terms of how we document and package ourselves and package how people should look at us, how people should experience us as Africans, as well as how people should understand us. But then again, understand that Africa is one of the continents with a whole lot of languages. I mean, you look at the likes of, we as South Africa, we have 12 official languages now, but there are countries with like 42 languages. You look at the likes of Nigeria and all of those things. But personally, I feel like that causes a huge disconnect, within us ourselves, Africans. I think we cannot begin to document the importance of traveling, the importance of tourism, without really getting into understanding what really is Africa,
Sure.
It's easy for Europe to find a niche and a space because most of those languages, by the way, Spanish, French, English itself, those are part of the languages that also are found in Africa itself.
Yeah.
So it's easy for Africans to understand those continents than it is for Africans to understand Africans themselves, So I think the role of tourism is really to foster, a connect and a culture, um, among people, just in a
I
high level
agree. I
perspective.
agree.
And I feel like in Africa we have quite beautiful stories. We had quite beautiful heritage. We have a lot of things. And in the previous episode with the president of the Africa's Association for
Yeah,
Visitor
yeah.
Experiences and Attractions, remember I posed a question to ask what is the gap, in terms of promoting African attractions to the world. And she said it's simple. It's the concept of Ubuntu in a form of understanding who we are as Africans,
Yeah.
in a form of understanding ourselves in from a high level perspective, to say we Africans are tailored different. But now what are those differences among ourselves, and how can we shape the educational aspect of that, in terms
Mm.
of getting people from within Africa to prioritize, maybe like for instance going to the likes of Kenya to experience Kenya, going to the likes of Nigeria to really learn how Nigerians are, how they handle themselves in their country, and really to find those things that speaks to how we connect with each other.
Yeah.
So I think for myself, those are some of the things. What inspires this podcast itself are the huge gaps, in terms of understanding what tourism truly is. Tourism is not only about just going to travel, but it's also about identifying yourself.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is a quote by a German philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. He says, "A mind exposed to new experiences cannot return to its old dimensions."
Of course.
So one of the reasons
And
why,
traveling
yeah,
exposes you to, like, new dimensions.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So part of the reasons why you have all of these misconceptions is because Europeans travel at the African continent, but we do not travel our own countries. We do not
Yeah.
travel within our own, regions, within our own continent itself. So when someone comes and asks a question about Africa itself, you only hold one perspective, whereas that demonstrates a huge disconnect among us Africans.
Yeah.
So it means we don't own our own story, and tourism is one of the models we can use to own that story, I think.
Yeah. But I also feel like the version that is being portrayed out there, especially in places like Asia,
Yeah.
China, Korea, according to the people that have been there, I think it's intentional also. It's not necessarily about saying, okay, we've only witnessed this part of Africa, so we don't know the other side of Africa. I think
yeah.
the ordinary people in China have never been to Africa, yes, so they don't know how Africa is. But when you think about the high level people, they've been to Africa and they are also building in Africa, so they know the beautiful side of Africa, but they will still choose to portray, that version that they
Yeah.
know that, okay, it's gonna set a negative image about the African continent. Talking about Africans who, as Africans, we are not traveling Africa. There's a lot of issues, I think, that lead to that. Recently, William Ruto, the president of Kenya, and Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, they just launched or announced that the visa-free thing, right? Which is who's this guy? Who's this? I forgot. The guy, one of the liberators from Africa. I just forgot his name. But his version of one Africa, just being able to travel from one country to another without needing a visa. We start, and I think it's a Julius Malema kind of a version, in terms of the African continent. So I think there's a lot of challenges, because just to travel like to these African countries, not even far, like just to travel from these close by nations, you need visa, there's a lot of documentation and a lot of processes that needs to take place in between. But if you look at other countries outside of the African continent, it's easy for them to travel to Africa than it is for Africans to actually travel around the African continent. So I think things like visa-free announcements recently by William Ruto of Kenya and Paul Kagame of Rwanda, I think it's one of the greatest things that we should celebrate. They say those countries are captured by the West, but hey, we'll see.
Yeah, I think this can be answered in two parts, right?
Okay.
Number one, yes, indeed, the issue of visas is quite there. Wherein I I so wish some of these things were documented. Sometimes you travel to Cape Town and you meet someone who comes from a country called the Gambia.
Mhm.
Actually, I have a friend from the country called the Gambia.
Yeah.
When I had conversations with him, he was just telling me about how many times he's been trying to come to South Africa.
Wow.
He said to me he tried to come like 4 years back to South Africa. But because coming from the country such as the Gambia itself, he had to fly to Nigeria to
Yeah.
actually apply for his visa. Now, mind you, you can't go and apply for a visa and expect to receive it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So now he had to fly back to the Gambia, waiting for the visa to be approved. So he can fly back to
And
Nigeria, collect the visa, and then
Yeah.
fly back to his country
that's
and
crazy.
wait 3 years until he
That's crazy.
gathers enough budget so that he
Yeah.
can finally come to South Africa. And those are some of the things, man, that like I say, they need documentation. They need to be documented. They need the likes of our podcasting to really get to understand, from the ground perspective in terms
Yeah.
of conducting a research as well, because this is not just a conversation, but also it's a research to try and probe and find those missing links. I personally feel like maybe a bit of information gap is there, or maybe an education gap. It's quite fair for us to also note that some of these European countries, some of these countries outside of the African continent themselves, they also do apply for visa coming to South Africa, by the way.
Yes.
But then it leads back to the information gap, like I'm saying,
Yeah.
I feel like we need to hold more sessions whereby we advocate for information. I was telling some guy yesterday, he was saying to me he needs a Schengen visa, he needs to visit Thailand and all of those things. But I was like, are you sure a Schengen visa is the only requirement you need? What other things do you need? When I was reading and studying tourism, there are a lot of countries with different policies, from country perspective. Some countries need you to have like a form of a yellow fever certificate to make sure that you're not coming with some diseases like some flus and all of those things. With Africa, man, we've been holding the pinnacle of all of these things, like your Ebola crisis and all of these things. And I think the misconceptions as well, thinking maybe people who come from Africa do not really have the resources, to treat these hygienic, diseases better than any other countries. But I feel like really we need to really start there in the educational platform, whereby we are educated from local structures. And I mean, it speaks to also marketing tourism itself. We need to have more sessions whereby local tourism associations do various sessions that seeks to educate the establishment owners or maybe the general public itself. Because we need to know if I want to travel out of South Africa or if I want to, form a travel agency that's going to bring a group of Africans to South Africa itself from different countries. How are those countries aligned with us, as South Africa itself? I feel like personally that's where we need to start, number one. But also number two, Ash, these issues of visa, you look at the country context of Europe. Europe, they have this thing called a Euro pass. It means it's easy for me to visit Spain, visit France, visit Italy as well. All of those countries, and as well as other countries, because you can easily purchase a train ticket, pay it in advance. That train ticket will allow you to get into any country without any, hassles in terms of having to prove yourself and all of those
The
things.
visa process.
Yeah, so I feel like we need to really study that model. I'm not sure how they are doing it, and not to say we need to utilize the very same model. I mean, we as Africans, like I said before, we are different, and we need to understand our differences. But in that, learning from those countries to see how are they doing it. You look at also something like your travel cultures. They have very, astute travel culture initiatives. When it's tourism month, it takes a lot of strain for us, to encourage people to travel. But people are naturally, motivated already in those country contexts because traveling is something that they learn from an early age, from an inception.
Okay.
I mean, when you come from your primary school, your high school, and then there are things like your spring breaks. Spring breaks, it means a group of young people are going to meet in serene environments, in a quiet space, outside of the city bars and all of those things. And what are they doing there? They're consuming an experience. So they are traveling, they're consuming an experience. And as they grow up with those cultural instincts, tied with them. So obviously, you would want to travel to see other worlds, to experience the same thing you're experiencing. So
Of
you
course,
get
yeah.
tired of consuming the same experience in the same specific environment, such a point that it invites you, to go try out new things. So I think we really need to start there, create a space whereby we are going to learn more about tourism. I feel like tourism in South Africa, especially from a market perspective, people who are supposed to be motivated to travel, we need to have educational sections that speaks to getting people to understand what tourism truly is,
Mm. But
and what tourism is in
let's
Africa
bring it
itself.
home. Let's bring it home,
Mhm.
KG. So now this is the travel podcast, right?
Yeah.
Obviously we're speaking now, high level stuff. This is
Mm.
like high level helicopter kind of view,
Yeah.
Let's bring it home because we are in Soweto right now. We are very fortunate to have been allowed to shoot at Lifestyle Cafe next door,
Yeah.
which is in Protea Glen, Extension 16. And of course, if you want to
Mm.
come and just see the place, enjoy some music, we will showcase the place itself just in between this podcast, so that you can see how the place look even outside when you come, so that you don't get lost. The reason why I'm talking about that is for us to bring it home, because yes, we would love to travel the world, like what am I actually, this is where we are going.
Exactly.
But let's start with our plan, and let's tell our listeners what are we going to do in the next coming episodes. Which spots are we going to visit, and why are we doing that? Maybe you can tackle that, because I see that
Exactly. Yeah.
you're on the flow.
But then I think number one, there has not been any platform, that seeks to encompass an informative session from the different levels, obviously, of tourism stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean from entrepreneurs, from the government, the department itself,
Sure.
from like the people who are really volunteering. There's a concept called volunteerism. Those people are volunteering in effort, to bring about economic change or certain changes around the tourism industry itself, and also going into the private sector. I think number one, as we said, the main purpose of this podcast is to create a research, something that we can take back, and go and advise certain, levels of tourism institutions,
associations.
associations, exactly. Yeah. So really, we are going to be focusing on interviewing the likes of your, cafe next door from Ekasi, Soweto, to your guest house that's actually around cafe next door. There's Zuni guest house around here. I saw some guest house. To also, go a bit further to interviewing different levels in terms of star grading, your 1 to 5-star hotels, and the 5-star premium. There's a 5-star premium hotels as well. But also, we are not only going to focus on that, we are also going to go into like your regional association, your provincial association, as well as the department itself, so that we understand where people are in terms of positioning.
So even the Minister of Tourism is actually welcome on this podcast.
Exactly.
That in a nutshell, that's what he's saying.
Yeah, but as well, not only to focus on the people that you always see on television, on the screens, telling us about tourism principles and all of those things, basically going to, there are people who invest in the tourism businesses, but they don't really have the background in terms of understanding tourism itself, instead of understanding how tourism is positioned from the government perspective, coming down to all levels of tourism, and then you go back to your varsity, you go back to your to your secondary school educators as well, because they form a big part of the tourism value chain. And I think for us to also go into interviewing the likes of your security guards from your big hotel chains, those people see a lot of things, but are they really giving us enough, research and feedback in terms of how they view and perceive tourism themselves? So those are some of the interesting things. I think
very interesting.
If each and every single individual who plays a role in the tourism value chain, shares their knowledge, their experience, we are going to most likely, be able to sell and position ourselves better in terms of getting domestic tourism growth and travel trends to really, fluctuate, get people to start prioritizing tourism, because we as stakeholders ourselves will be understanding better. And the podcast is, of course, a proper channel for us to initiate those gaps.
Yeah. course, I mean, content creation for me, I come from the media side, obviously. So content creation is number one for me, and I think each and every industry must capitalize on content creation.
Yeah.
The other thing that we do, obviously, we're working on other projects, but just to add a little bit, I don't want to go off the subject, but we also help small businesses in the tourism space to scale up using content, through creating authentic content for their brand, for their businesses. And we also believe that in as much as small businesses are more focused on profits, they want to make money, they want to scale and all of that, they should never neglect their brand, and content creation is one of the aspects that if they invest right into the content creation side of things, they can be able to actually scale up the business, if done right,
Exactly,
of course.
yeah.
So yeah, sorry that I went off tune. Okay, now that we have explained that what are we gonna do, just to add on that, we wanna be visiting a lot of places in Soweto, places in Gauteng province, and places in the South African, what is it, in South Africa. And also should we start talking about going outside of the country? I think we can,
I think it's a
because
great
we do
conversation to
have a couple of people that are outside of the country that we're talking to right now.
as well as
In Zim, in Botswana.
yeah.
What's the other country?
I think the Gambia as well.
The Gambia. That guy from the Gambia, we can call him as well. We can try and see.
Ghana as well.
And Ghana, and we want Wode on the podcast, but that's after you guys have subscribed up until 100K subscribers.
But I think social media and content creation as well, it bridges a big gap that we are not really quite, paying attention to.
Yeah.
Like number one, the positioning itself. Who are the market actually who are supposed to come visit guest houses from the domestic perspective?
Yeah.
Who are those people? Where can we find them? So I think really social media plays that role, whereby you need to understand your positioning, you need to understand your market, you need to communicate a specific message to a specific market.
Sure.
And as much as you're positioning yourself as a brand, it's important that you align yourself with various markets. I mean, we have different levels of economic levels, right? We have people who from the economic class itself.
Yeah.
And those are the people who, have these misconceptions around tourism. You find people who are saying, but traveling is expensive,
Yeah.
But really, when you sit down with them and you say,
I don't
hey
have
guys,
time.
do you know you can live the same life that you're living here? You wake up, you take a taxi, you go to Josie, or you wake up, you take a taxi, go attend a festival. You can do quite the same thing. Wake up, take a bus, go to KZN, sleep in a local guest house. Wake up in the morning, take a taxi, go to the beach. Come back using a taxi. Easy. So
the same thing that you do every day.
Exactly. But also there are different structures in which, in our own research and in our own experiences as well, there's an app called Taxi App SA. The Taxi App SA actually is an app that, holds a lot of taxi ranks and all of those things. So if you combine such things, and make them become a part of the value chain of the tourism facilitation itself, we are going to show, hold a very, very interesting market.
All right.
Especially looking into how tourism is post-COVID-19.
Yeah.
We need the guys who are selling ice creams from Ekasi to be part of the experience itself, because when you wake up early in the morning in the guest house and you're from a different space, you need to know, what can I do? What are some of the things I need to engage, Go and grab a quota and all of those things. But it speaks to different markets, it speaks to different experiences. Because you can go to a 5-star hotel and find those services in one place, whereby you won't have to travel far to go for hikings and all of those places. So just understanding the different levels of tourism from, of course, the perspectives of the people who are going to be interviewing.
All right. So we don't want to make this one very long. This is an introduction episode. Yeah. We realized that a couple of videos that we posted that we were interviewing certain stakeholders were not really positioned very well. So we said, look, let's do this introduction episode so that everybody can be on the same level. They understand what we do. and we move together as one. So guys, subscribe on our channel and make sure that you are able to stay tuned each and every time when we drop an episode, each and every time when we have, whatever, an announcement. We're going to be traveling to a lot of places. We're going to be going to a whole lot of places. We might come back again in this same place, of course, maybe with a different guest. We'll see. It's happening in a very creative way. So just follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page. It's the Travel Podcast. So it's Travel Connect on Facebook. But subscribe to this channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. You want to say something before we close this one?
Yeah, I think what's important to note is how we really, create different settings for this podcast so that it's not only from a seating arrangement itself. So we might be coming to a place near you. Maybe if you find you in a mall, if we do like podcast activations, whereby I walk around asking people about tourism, simple tourism questions, and then take all those questions, create a conversation that we can chat with various stakeholders. But then, of course, just like our first episode, we did a podcast launch. We also do like podcast launch in tourism sessions, tourism info sessions. Like, for instance, if there's a tourism workshop, we come there, attend the workshop, participate, interact, share. But also at the end of the workshop itself, we do like pop-up podcastings, whereby we interview people based on the various conversation that are led in the specific workshop itself. I think that's important for us to also make notice of, so that people can fully know that, we are out there, we are out there in the ground.
We exist.
We exist. But also if you are from an association itself, feel free to invite us, whether it's a community-based association. We are there, man. We are a research unit. We are a research team, actually. We focus more on the element of research and feedback as well. So it's important for us to cover all these different spaces as well.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Elvis Molefi Molf. And with that being said, this is the Travel Podcast. We are out.
Thank you.
Bring that flavor with the plata. Rents and dollars and a kwacha. I am from the